So today we get to talk about sex.
Woohoo!
You're excited?
I shouldn't be?
I don't know. It's going to be quite a day. It's interesting. Several years ago, we were asked to speak on a marriage cruise called the Love Like You Mean It Cruise by Family Life. And Bob Lepine, our friend who asked us to speak, hadn't told us our topic. So a few weeks before the cruise, I'm texting him on my phone, I'm using my thumbs, because I said, Bob, what do you want us to speak on? And he's like, tell me the things you speak around the country on. And we're like, conflict,
communication,
and you name it. So then I added sex, and he goes, oh, you guys need to speak on sex. We have no couple speaking on sex.
And we're like, oh, great.
I text back immediately, are you serious, dude? You want a couple in their 50s talking about sex? And right away he texts back, are you still having sex? Then talk about it.
You think that's so funny?
I think it's funny. So here's the thing. Yes, we still are. And yes, today we're going to talk about it. And it's going to be a great day because it could be uncomfortable for some people. But here's the thing. Everybody else is talking about it.
Yeah.
We know what the culture thinks. We know what movies think. We don't know what God thinks. The church has been pretty much silent on this for decades. I never heard a sermon, a pastor talk about this growing up. The only thing I ever heard in church about sex was it's wrong, it's dirty, and if you do it, you'll go bald. So some of us are really bald. Anyway.
And really, God talks a lot about it.
Oh, yeah. And it's interesting, when we talk about this at our marriage conferences around the country, we often have couples line up to talk to us, and we think they're coming up to talk about their marriage, and how often...
Right, and how great they're doing. Yeah, but more often than not, they're talking about, this is so hard. Specifically, their sex life and the struggles in their sex life. Because honestly, we all bring so much baggage, especially into this area.
And I'll tell you this, sitting in the room right now are different categories of people when it comes to talking about sex. There's some are like the blushers. You're like, oh my gosh, you're gonna talk about this like with the lights on?
That means tonight we're gonna have to do it.
Yeah, and then you've got on the other side of that, you got the locker room crowd who's like, yeah, let's talk about it. But you've got that going on in the room, and we've got to dance that little tightrope.
And then in the room also are, like, for me, I have sexual abuse in my background. And so that's true for some of the listeners. So for some of you, you've gone through that. That's so painful, and it really does affect this area. So how do we walk with that? How do we talk about it?
So we're going to try and be sensitive to that, because it is an area of our lives that many people have been hurt. And a lot of that's because we don't even know God's original design. So let's talk about that. We got just 3 thoughts. And the first one is this: bring God into the bedroom.
Which everybody, you're just like, wait, what?
That sounds weird, but here's what I mean. Bring God's perspective into this area of our lives. And as Ann said, God's the one who designed and created sex. I remember we said that once at a marriage conference. God created sex, and this guy in like the 3rd row goes, praise Jesus, It was like, his wife crawled under the chair. But here's the thing. We think the culture came up with it. No, it's actually something God designed himself. You go back to the Bible, to the very beginning, the Bible starts with a wedding, and you have a couple, Adam and Eve, the first man and first woman, and God brings them together, not as just a couple, but as a married couple. And in Genesis, which means beginnings, the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 2, it says this: that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. Now, there is no father and mother in this garden. It's just Adam and Eve. So what's God doing? He's setting up this institution called marriage, and he says it's a beautiful thing. You're going to leave mom and dad, and you're going to cleave to your wife, and you're going to become one flesh. And that means sexual intercourse. It means sexual intimacy. And it's from the very beginning. Here's another passage that's in the Bible. I didn't even know this kind of stuff was in the Bible. Proverbs 5 says this: may your fountain be blessed, and may you rejoice in the wife of your youth. And then he says this: a loving doe, a graceful deer, may her breasts satisfy you always. May you ever be captivated by her love. I had no idea the word breasts was in the Bible.
Well, it's so funny. I have a friend who has 2 daughters, and she walked into their bedroom one day, and they threw this book under the bed. And she's thinking, what are they looking at? And she pulls it out, and it was the Bible, and it was this passages like this in the Song of Solomon.
It's like you think it's R-rated, but actually it's not R-rated at all. Why would we be ashamed to talk about what God was not ashamed to create?
In marriage.
In marriage, and that's his design. And it's interesting when you think about, okay, what was God's design for sex in marriage? It's really a couple things. One is obviously procreation or reproduction. This is his command to multiply and to build a godly legacy, he gave us a way to do that. It's called sex. Now think about this. If you're God and you want your human beings to reproduce, you could come up with anything you want. It wouldn't have to be sex. It could have been like cross-pollination. You know, you're like in aisle 7 at Kroger and somebody sneezes by you and you're like, oh, I'm pregnant again. Thank God it isn't that way. It's like a whole, it's unbelievable.
It's
God gave us this
Yes.
unbelievable thing. And part of the purpose is reproduction. I tell you what, I never heard there was any other purpose growing up in church. That's the only thing I heard. But if you study the Bible, you find out God also had another purpose, and it is pleasure. God desires that this be something that's pleasurable. He doesn't cover his eyes when a married couple is making love. Think about this. He actually applauds. Some of you can't even picture a God like that, but God actually applauds when a husband and wife make love. He's going, way to go.
Well, I heard one author say that when a husband and wife make love, it's almost like every time they do that, they're renewing their vows. And that's kind of a beautiful way to look at it. But it's hard, isn't it? Like, especially if you grew up outside the church, especially if you have no context for God, like to bring God into this, it feels like, wait, it's supposed to be, that seems weird to do that. But yet he designed it and he's applauding it.
And one of the most beautiful things about it, the way he designed our bodies, the way God designed the pleasure part of it, is when a husband and wife make love. And by the way, when anybody has sex, this is what's going on. It isn't just physical. It is the most intimate thing you'll ever do with another person, ever. It's soul to soul. It isn't just body to body. Let me tell you, nobody ever told me that, but that's what's going on.
It's really giving a part of your soul to that person. And that's why we talk about this in the confines of marriage.
Yeah, God says this is so intimate, you've got to protect it. And so God did put some restrictions on it. He says, do this in the covenant of marriage between one man and one wife, a husband and wife. It's like God says, protect it, because you're not just having sex. You're not just having pleasure body to body. This is soulish in nature. You're giving a part of your soul to one another, and you don't want to tie your soul to somebody else that you're not in a covenant of till death do us part with.
And we know, culturally speaking, people are like, what? This is the dumbest thing. I used to think this was the dumbest thing and had no idea that this was God's beauty and design. And here's the word, protection for us. Because Dave and I have pasts that we brought other people into this relationship, and it's really been hard.
And our biggest struggle in our first year, you heard about that, where you didn't want to be married anymore. A lot of our pain, I'll be honest with you, came from sexual baggage, sexual memories and things we brought into our relationship. We had no idea what we did before marriage would have an impact on our marriage. Oh my gosh, especially in this area, it does. Why? Because it's that deep. It's soul to soul. And so when you bring God into the bedroom, when you bring God's heart, God's perspective in, it's like you step back and go, oh my gosh, this is so delicate. It's so beautiful. I want to do it his way. And I want to honor him in this way. And so it's a beautiful thing that we've experienced in 3 decades of marriage. As you bring God into the bedroom, you bring his perspective. And so here's the thing. Bringing his perspective makes me, okay, I want to love her and cherish her and honor her. And I want to understand her. As we said last time, she's so different, I'm so different than each other. But this applies in the bedroom as well. So we're going to talk about this. The first thought was bring God in the bedroom. The second thought is this. Your body is a wonderland. You want me to sing it?
Yes.
John Mayer, your body is a wonderland. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nobody knows what he says there. But here's what they're getting at. And we all know this. Men and women are different. And again, we're not saying all women are this way and all men are this way. But when it comes to the area of sex, there's differences. And one of the big ones is just how we approach it, how we think about it. Men tend to be sort of compartmentalized and women tend to be sort of holistic. Compartmentalized means I have compartments and I can slide into one compartment and then slip into another and they sort of never overlap. Holistic. I'm not even sure we understand holistic.
It's like you're global because everything runs into everything. In other words, if Dave and I had a fight and then we make up and we're done, but 2 minutes later, Dave could be like, let's have sex. I'm like, we just got over our fight. He's like, yeah, we're over it.
Yeah, and she can't think that way because here's my analogy. Women are like a string of Christmas lights. If one bulb's out, they're all out. Guys could care less if any of them are on. Let's go. But It's just we're absolutely totally
Yeah, because
different.
we're thinking of all of our stuff at the same time. And if one thing is off, it affects every other area. And so I came up with this visual illustration just to help guys and to help Dave explain, like, this is what it's like for me. Let's say this night, I'm like, give Dave the look like, hey, how about tonight is the night?
She's never given me that look,
I have
by the
to.
way.
Like,
I don't know what this is.
Hey, this is it. That's
Like,
our
woo, woo.
that's our little cue there. So that means like tonight it's happening, right? So Dave goes into his sex compartment. So he's upstairs. This is the only thing that's on his mind. That's it. He's waiting for me. So I'm downstairs, right? And here, as a woman, here's what I'm thinking. All right, so what needs to be done tomorrow? Do we have any milk in the refrigerator for breakfast? Do we have groceries? And so I start thinking about that, right? So I start picking up bags. Oh gosh, Dave's traveling this weekend. Like, what's he doing? What's my schedule? What's that look like? Oh my gosh, we're writing this book. We have to write this more chapters in it. I haven't slept. When was the last time that I slept? I haven't slept in ages. And then I'm thinking, if my boys are in the house, I'm like, oh gosh, are their clothes ready? Did they played football? Is all their stuff clean? And then I can think, oh, my mom was sick. Like, is she doing okay? And I need to call my friends. And so I'm picking up all these things and I'm thinking about this, right? Dave is upstairs in the bedroom waiting for me. It's not even this. I have probably 100 more things clinging to me, thinking about them, and it affects every area of my life. So I get upstairs, right? And I go to bed, and here I am, like, I can barely even get in the bed because it's like, I've got all this on my mind. And then Dave looks at me, he's like, what's on your mind? I'm like, are you kidding? All this stuff, you not get it? And he goes, no, I don't get it.
And here's the thing, when you realize all this is weighing her down, it's like, okay, there goes that idea.
And then, you know what we do as women? We pick up another bag. It's called the guilt bag, and that's like the heaviest one. So what do we do about this? Because God made us so different. And so we want to walk through that. And I'm going to tell you, for Dave and I, this had a huge effect on our marriage because we were great. Like a lot of couples, like how often you do it, the frequency, you're really similar. When we had kids, I was exhausted. So we have 3 little boys running around and I'm like, this is so hard because I'm carrying all this stuff. And Dave's frustrated because he wants to have sex more. I'm feeling like, well, if you'd be more affectionate or if you'd be more loving and cherish me more, maybe I'd be interested. And so we were really missing each other. And I was like, why did God make us so different? Like, this is a bummer. I love the book Love and Respect because Emerson Eggridge talks about how we're different as male and female. And he says, to get to a man's heart, and that's what we want as women. We want to get into them and their relationship and who they are. To get to a man's heart, you first have to go through his body, like sexually. But for a man to get to a woman's body, he first has to go through her heart. And it's about relationship. And so I read that, I'm like, oh, well, that's awesome. We're just missing each other, And yet, why did God do that? Because this can be a real difference. And I'm not saying that all men want sex more than women or women want sex more than men. It could be totally flipped, and I'm not sure how that looks in your family relationship, but this can be real tension.
And the interesting thing about it is I got mad, and we had fights about this because I did not understand how different she was. And we talked about this last time. It's like, what are her top 3 needs?
Right.
Guys, do you remember? Are you yelling this out right now? Because, man, it's like after that last session, I hope you went and said, okay, what are your top 3 needs? And I didn't know that Ann longed for me to be affectionate. She longed for conversation.
I wanted relationship.
Right.
And Dave, I felt like he wanted sex more than relationship. I wanted relationship more than sex because the relationship led to sex.
And what we both realize is it's absolutely beautiful that God made us so different. And again, in your relationship may be flipped, but it was like, oh my gosh, if Ann was just like me, it'd just be an act. And honestly, I was good with that, right? But no, it's like, it's so much more beautiful and more intimate and deeper than that. And if I was just like Ann, all we'd ever do is talk. So it's
not
like,
true.
No, I know it isn't. But it's like, oh my gosh, God made us different Because the bottom line is vertical marriage means I go to Christ to find my life, and then out of that I come to my marriage and say, how can I give? How can I serve? How can I honor your needs is more important than mine?
Well,
and that applies in the bedroom as well. It isn't about me, it's about how do I cherish her? How do I respect him? And that makes lovemaking really intimate because it isn't just
beautiful.
about me, it's about serving serving your spouse.
I love what one of our mentors, Howard and Jeannie Hendricks, they were speaking one time. They were in their 80s at this time. And someone in this conference asked them a question, what is sex like in your 80s? Like they were 85.
And I actually went, ugh, I don't even want to know.
But I was like, wow.
I don't want to know.
Yeah, but here's what he said, which I was so surprised at. He said, those of you who have been married less than 15 years, you still don't even get it. You think sex is about the body. Because after you're married for a while, you realize that it's so much more than the physical or just the bodies. He says, sex is a union of the soul. It's not about orgasm. It's about combining your soul together because sex can look different when you get older with health problems, with all kinds of things. He said, but when you come together intimately, sexually, in this beautiful way, whatever that looks like, he said that brings glory to God, and that is intimacy, and it's this union.
And when we heard that, we both thought, we're not even close.
Yeah.
We just want to grow in this area, and God wants us to grow in this area, and it's a lifelong process of learning how to love and cherish and cheer one another in a beautiful way, not just everywhere else in your house, but the bedroom, but also in the sexual area as well. So when you bring God into the bedroom, it's like, oh my gosh, that's a broader vertical perspective I've ever had. When you start to understand the differences between one another, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
And let me give you some tips, guys, because you may have seen that situation. I had this one guy come up to me one time. He's like, that is the most depressing thing I've seen when you brought all that baggage up. He goes, but that's my wife. So that may seem depressing, and so here's a tip. Here's what I used to tell Dave. When we go to bed at night, you know, I've got all this on my mind. One of the things that can help me to get rid of that is, first of all, once in a while, ask me this. So guys, ask your wife this. What's the heaviest bag you're carrying in your life? And if you really want to score points, then you say, is there any bag that I can take off that you're carrying that I could carry? Whew, that's a good one. And here's another thing, another little tip. Here's what I used to tell Dave. Let's just when we get in bed, can you just...
Are we going to be this honest here?
Yes.
Talk about getting in bed?
When we go to bed, so I can get all this stuff off of my mind, can you just rub my back for a while? 5 minutes, 10 minutes would be amazing. But rub my back. And stay on the back.
Okay, that's enough.
Because, the hand keeps drifting down. Stay on the back. That helps your wife just to disengage from the day, all the things that are going on in her mind. That really helps. That was
all right, so there's a lot
of... That was frustrating for you, wasn't it?
This is like PG-13. That just went rated R. But anyway,
No, it didn't.
And we do want to help because God has taught us so much about bringing God in here and getting his heart and his perspective, understanding each other and the differences. And then here's just one last thought. And I used the song for the last one, Your Body is a Wonderland. I'll use another one from the 60s. Come on, baby. Light my fire. Come on, baby, light my fire.
That just aged you.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't matter. But and the thought is this. Bring some creativity to this area of your life. Man, you married couples.
Have fun, yes.
Bring something to this. You go back to the Bible in the book of Solomon. It's really interesting. The woman actually says this to her husband. Come, my beloved, let us go to the countryside. Let us spend the night in the villages. Let us go early to the vineyards to see if the vines have budded, if their blossoms have opened, and if the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give you my love. I tell you what, I never heard stuff like this growing up from the Bible. It's like, what is she saying here? She's saying, let's be creative. Let's go spend a night in a hotel. Let's go somewhere else and make love.
They were actually in a field, in a vineyard.
And we're not suggesting you do that. You got to be careful about that whole thing. But it's just bring some spontaneity and creativity to this area of your married life. And I tell you what, this is something that we've had to learn over the years as well. It can get boring and predictable, and you're busy, and you think this area of the house, this area of a relationship doesn't matter. I mean, make your bedroom a nice place. Don't put your motorcycle in there and your ticker tape stock thing in there. Bring some creativity in there.
I have to even share this. Here's Dave and I, and we'll have an anniversary dinner or something, and I'll say What do you feel like when you look back on this past year? What was the most memorable
You're going to
moment?
share everything, aren't
Yes, of the year. Without fail, every time it's this some like having sex somewhere. I'm like, really? Again? Really?
you? Okay, one time I was doing speaking at a chapel service for the Detroit Lions as their chaplain on my birthday. It was a Saturday night. We're playing at a home game, and the next morning, and we go to a hotel and spend the night there. So I'm speaking to the guys. It's my birthday, and I'm like 5 minutes into the message. There's probably 30 players and 4 or 5, 6 coaches there. And one of our players walks in late, and he walks right to the front of the room while I'm talking, hands me an envelope, and I barely look at it because I'm in the middle of my thing. I'm like, dude, just sit down. But I look at the envelope, and all I see is it says, Dave Wilson, emergency open. Well, I don't have time, so I put it down, and I keep going. And Luther was his name. Luther goes, no, you got to open that right now. And so then I'm like freaking out, like, oh my gosh, maybe something's wrong with the kids.
Well,
maybe
didn't it say something on that
It
envelope?
said emergency, open immediately. So I thought, okay, so somebody might have to go to the hospital. So I open it up, and I'm sort of in a panic state. And I don't know why to this day I did this, but I read it out loud. So I open it up, and all these guys are looking at me, and it said, hey, big boy, I'm naked up in room 20, come get. And I shut it, and I look, and all the guys are like, oh my gosh. And it was her surprising me, saying she got a room upstairs.
The key was in the envelope. Who thought he would read it out loud?
I don't know why I read it out loud, but I did, and these guys were stunned. And so I said to the Detroit Lion guys, I said, hey guys, guess where I'm going after chapel? And Bobby Ross was our head coach at the time. He's like this military guy, prim and proper. I don't think I ever heard him say the word sex out loud. He's in the back of the room, and he goes, hey Dave, you better go now. We'll take it from here. And I'm like, see ya. And I run out. And when I run into those players that were on that team decades later, they're like, the only chapel I ever remember. The only thing I ever remember you saying was that day that you read Ann's note. And it was just basically this. It was like, oh my gosh, it's okay to bring a little fun and joy to this area of your marriage.
Because we get lazy. The demands of life pull us, our kids' schedules, everything is pulling us away. This area is really important because it really does unite you. It's intimate, it makes you one, it makes you fall in love all over again. And I'll end with this story. I had a Lions Bible study that I lead with the wives and girlfriends of the NFL team. And so this one day, this one girl says, hey, tonight's our anniversary. It's our 1-year anniversary, and my husband got a limo, and he's taking me to the best restaurant downtown. And we're like, oh, that's awesome. That's cool. I'm like, but what are you going to do for him? She goes, I'm going. What do you mean? And I go, no, you need to do something special, like wear something, underneath or whatever. Just make it special for him. So she goes, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's not really me, but it's him, so try it. So the next morning she calls me and she goes, okay, I'm just going to tell you, best night of our marriage. It was amazing. And my husband said to me, you're not usually like this. Where did you come up with this idea? And she goes, our Bible study. And here's what he says next. He goes, I don't want you to ever miss one of those Bible studies again. So guess who showed up at our couples Bible study?
And this is a husband that never came to the Bible study. He shows up the next week. And he started coming, and that guy gave his life to Christ about 6 weeks later. And to this day right now, they're in full-time vocational Christian work. They have 6 kids, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just an amazing story that this guy ends up coming to Jesus because of lingerie. So, I mean, again, it's just like God's design for sex in marriage is a beautiful thing. Doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean there's not really real struggles. Yeah. We've had to work through those. But when you bring God into the bedroom, when you understand we're different, when you decide I'm going to bring some life to this area of our marriage as well as others, it can be a game changer. And just a couple thoughts.
Yeah, because this could be overwhelming. And maybe you haven't even talked about this. So what do you think they should do?
Yeah, one of the first things I would say is talk about this.
How?
Seriously, this is an area that's very hard for couples to talk about. So I'm like, bring it up. Say, what do you think?
And be loving and kind and pray before you just kind of know how you'll say it so that your spouse doesn't get defensive.
And I'd even say this, parents, talk about this with your children.
Yes.
They're hearing about this everywhere else. Please bring God's word, God's truth to that conversation and talk about it with them as well.
And some of you, maybe you're single and you're like, wow, I've never even heard of this. I've never heard this. What do I think of this? Even though having sex just in marriage, that covenant, I think that's a great discussion to have with friends. Why could this work for us?
And the biggest thing is this, go vertical. which means get God's heart, get God's perspective, surrender this area of your life to Christ and let him in and watch what he does.